In this video, I'll be talking about another game from my book, which is the most instructive chess games. So this game is called Weak Pawns, Weak Squares and Mighty Mighty Knights. So black is Nimzowitsch, he's a very famous player, and white is, I'm not going to say his name but because I can't pronounce it, but he is a Latvian player. I googled him. He's a very strong Latvian player. And this game was played in Karlsbad 1929. And what's instructive and amazing about this game is the fact that when white resigns, black wins, by the way. So when white resigns, the material is completely equal. So Nimzovich's position was so good that white resigned, even though he hadn't won any material. So this game teaches us the importance of how well pieces are placed and positional play, rather than just tactics and stuff, because the material was equal, but black absolutely won the game. So yeah, let's have a look. The game starts with d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop b4. Surprisingly enough, Nimzowitsch plays the Nimzo-Indian. So white responds with knight f3. Black's normal moves here are b6, c5, castles, and probably even d5. Yeah, d5 as well. But Nimzowitsch takes on c3, which is not really a popular way of meeting knight f3, but it's not bad either. Thing is, I think both sides are happy with this because white gets the bishop pair, and also the b file can be used for the rook, so that's nice for white. But on the other hand, black gets a better pawn structure, and white's got double pawns which could be targets for later. So both sides have their plans. d6. Now black went d6 because black wants to play e5 simply to sort of claim the centre. And black's happy to play d6 now because they've traded their dark squared bishop off. So had they played d6 with their bishop still there, then that bishop wouldn't be strong, because you know when you got the pawns the same colour as your bishop, the bishop's a bad bishop usually and it has less scope, so the bishop wouldn't be able to move around as much. But now black's dark squared bishop's gone, black's happy to put all their squares in dark squares, and that also helps the light squared bishop become better, because you know, good bishops and bad bishops, this bishop can move around when the pawns are in dark squares. Anyway, queen c2, queen e7, again just sort of reinforcing the e5 idea. Bishop a3, this stops e5 because it pins that pawn, so if black went e5 now, this would be a mistake because white would just take and black wouldn't be able to take back. So instead black went c5. This is a good move because it fixes white's weaknesses. So these are white's weaknesses. These are doubled pawns. Double pawns are usually bad. Sometimes they're good, but they're usually bad because they can be targets for later. So black will be able to take them later because they're not, when they're, you know, isolated. Well, they're not isolated yet, but when they're doubled, they can't really protect each other as easily. I mean, like, yeah, most people know double pawns, like the pros and cons of them. So c5, fixing those. g3. g3 is not a bad move, but my book says it's probably not the best idea because in the future, as I was just saying, these pawns are weaknesses. So with the bishop moving to g2, because obviously g3 with the idea of moving the bishop to g2, with the bishop on g2, the bishop won't be able to protect this pawn as easily. Whereas if white had just gone e4, this bishop's like automatically protecting that one. Do you know what I mean? It's just one sort of bonus of playing e4. So yeah, g3, it's still not bad. It's still an equal game, but it maybe just gives black a slight edge. Now black's idea is similar. Black wants to go bishop b7. So bishop g2, bishop b7, castles and castles. So it's still, black maybe has a slight edge because of the pawn structure, but it's not at all losing for white. But here I think white starts to go wrong. So white plays knight h4. White wants to trade black's light squared bishop because white felt that this bishop was more of a danger to white than that bishop was more of an asset. Do you know what I mean? So he just thought it'd be better to trade. The reason why is because this bishop could come up to e4 in the future and it'd be quite strong there. So white just felt like they wanted to trade the bishop. But knight h4 is not the best because, as you'll see, this knight becomes quite stranded. It's not very useful on this side of the board. My book says, even though trading bishops wasn't the best idea, if white was to trade bishops, the better way would be knight d2. So at least that knight is doing something in the centre rather than being over here. Anyway, knight h4. Now black trades the bishops. White took with the king, which is, I think, a mistake. You'll see why. But better would have been to take back with the knight, then at least the knight could come back in. But no, white took with the king. Now black gains a tempo and transfers their queen to the queen side. King side. No, queen side. With queen b7 check. So the king moves back. Now white finds themselves in a bit of trouble. Queen a6 threatens this pawn and that bishop. So there's not really much for white to do except from either give up the pawn, which white didn't do, or protect them both with the queen. Now black's knight hops in. Knight c6. These knights are really strong, and as you'll see in this game, these knights are just, they're the things that win the game. They're so active compared to white's knight here. So white just tries to bring their rook out. Then black goes knight a5, which is hitting this pawn and that queen. So more or less forcing white to trade queens. Black takes the queen. White takes back. Now black's knight comes to c4. These knights are just absolute monsters. They just dominate the rest of the game. Because this is a really good square for the knight, because there's no pawns to kick it away. The pawns are all moved forward. And that bishop's a dark square, so that bishop can't kick away. And that knight is all the way over there, so it can't kick the knight away. So this knight has found a really good outpost. Like the video I just posted as well a few days ago, that talked about knight outposts. Like this is another example of a great knight outpost. Look, it's just really it's really strong. So the bishop moves away. Now, I mean, a lot of moves are good for black here, but maybe just think about what you would do if you were black in this position. So yeah, pause the video or whatever. So yeah, as I said, loads of moves are good for black, but the best move, the one Nimzowitsch plays, is a6. So the idea behind a6 is to simply open the a file. So white takes, black takes back, and now this rook is active. It's putting pressure on this pawn, and it's just improved its position, if that makes sense. Other moves would have been fine, but a6 was the best move, and it's a good one to find. It's a good idea to open files. So white trades, black takes back, knight g2. The knight tries to come into the game, but it's too late. So black's other knight jumps in, knight d5, so threatening that pawn. The white rook protects it. Now the other rook swings in, putting pressure on that pawn. Black's knights are, blockading the light squares, and they're just so powerful. It's insane. e4, white just desperately tries to kick the knight away, but after knight e5, white resigned. The material is equal and no pieces were taken, and white is just completely lost. Let's just quickly look at why white resigned. So the rook's attacked. The rook can't go there because of the pawn, there or there because of the knights, and it can't go there because of this knight fork. So it would have to go here, after which black would just take this pawn, threatening that pawn, threatening the rook. The rook can't go there because this check would have forked it. can't go anywhere except here, after which black would just take the a pawn, since black controls the a file. That would have to trade, and yeah, the rook's on the 7th, the knights are just coming in, white is hopeless. So yeah, white resigned, and it's quite fair, like they weren't resigning prematurely, like the game is over. And it's just a perfect example of like positional strategic play, if that makes sense. Just the knights were what dominated the game. I think in hindsight, where white went wrong was probably, let me find it, g3. And like when the engine sees g3, the engine says black's a tiny bit better, but like it's still equal. But I think it's really hard to play for white, as white, and better would have been e4, because not only is it sort of taking a claim in the centre, but the bishop is better here, and the bishop in the future would go to d3, at least sort of have these ideas in mind and protecting that pawn, and white would just castle. I think it's much better if white played that. I think g3 was the mistake. Even though the engine doesn't say it's a mistake, that is sort of the mistake of the game. But yeah, that's Nimzowitsch. And I don't know if you know, but Nimzowitsch, he kind of invented the Nimzo-Indian opening, the opening that black played. So it makes sense that Nimzowitsch played the game so well. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. That was my 3rd video in games from this book. I'm not doing all the games because I'm only sort of focusing on the best games in that book, because not all the games are like, they're all good, but I'm picking the best ones that I think are the clearest. Obviously in this game, Nimzowitsch played so well with the knights, it's kind of hard to explain, but I hope what you take from this game is just the ideas of like how to take advantage of doubled pawns and making use of what pieces you have, and how material isn't everything, just where your pieces are and how active they are and where your opponent's pieces are also really important. Because a lot of people just focus on material and focus on tactics to win material and stuff, but that's not the only thing that can win a game. Just like positional and your pieces and where they are also really important. So yeah, hopefully I'll post another one of these games soon, because they're really good games. And yeah, see you in the next video.